Hi guys, in this video I'm going to talk about variables, and all a variable is something that stores information on your computer's memory. And I'm going to talk about first the type and the size of a variable. So variables store information on your computer's memory. That's not hard to understand. Your memory is just that chip in your computer that has, let's say, 2 gigs of memory or 3 gigs of memory. It's not infinite, so that's the whole point, is that it's finite. It's a finite space that you have to deal with, and you could run programs and listen to music and all that, but it all is working with your computer's memory. And these variables here are working with your computer's memory too, so they take up space, so they have size. So I'm going to talk about the size of each of these variables. You see like 1 byte, and then the type of a variable. So the type is important. I'll talk about that first. And the type is, all that means is, what kind of information can this variable hold? Can it hold numbers? Can it hold strings? Can it hold dates? Can it hold true and false? That is the type of a variable. It tells you what kind of information this variable can hold. That is type. That is what type means. And then there's the size of a variable, and that is how much space does it take up in your computer's memory. And of course, you want to take up as small a space in your computer's memory as possible, because if you take up lots of space, your computer is going to be slower. It can't run as fast. So it's important to declare variables with the right type. So if you're working with numbers, you want to have a type of a number. If you're working with strings or text, you want to have a type of a string. And then it's also important to not make your variables bigger than they need to be. So if you're only working with numbers between 0 and 255, a byte variable, the type of variable byte, can store numbers between 0 and 255. So if you're only working with numbers between, let's say, 0 and 100, you want to use this variable type, byte, because it's very small. It only holds 1 byte of memory. Whereas if you use a different type of variable, like integer, then it's going to use 2 bytes of memory. So let's talk about how you declare variables before we go any further. You want to declare a variable like this. Put dim, D-I-M, and then the name of your variable. And the name of your variable can be anything you want, but it cannot start with a number. It has to start with a letter, and it can't have spaces in it. And then after you declare the name of your variable, you want to put as and then the type. So this is where you put the type. So I'm just going to put byte here, as byte. So I just declared a variable. And also, you cannot, one more thing about the name is, you cannot put keywords. So if you can't make the name of your variable like dim, you can't do that. Or you can't make the name of your variable like sub or integer. Because all these are keywords that Excel uses commonly, and it doesn't let you use them. So it'll come up with a compiler like this. So make your variable name, unique, and no spaces. It can't start with a number, and you can't use keywords. And you also can't use like exclamation marks and things like that, any special characters. But that's how you declare a variable. Okay, you remember, you put dim, the name of your variable, and then the type of your variable. And like I said, the type is telling you what kind of information you can store here. Okay, so we know what a type is, and we know that variables have sizes. So now let's go through the variable types that you're going to use while you're programming. So I think we covered this a little bit. A byte is a type of variable that can store numbers between 0 and 255, and it takes up 1 byte of memory. So it's very small. It's the smallest variable type. And then a Boolean variable, it can hold the value true or false. So you can either put true here, or you can put false here. But as well, because your computer thinks in zeros and ones, you can put the number 0, and that'll stand for false, or you could put any non-zero number, anything, could be any non-zero number, like 23, and it'll stand for true. So that's what a Boolean type is. It stores the value true or false. And if you put a number in it, it's going to be either true if it's non-zero and false if it's zero. So let me just step into this, and I have the locals window here, and we could look into the computer's memory and see what that Boolean variable is. So here I'm going to assign 23 to this Boolean variable. It's type Boolean, and I'm going to assign it, and notice that var Boolean here is set to true, because any non-zero number stands for true. And you could also put true here. Either one works, but usually you're going to put true or false. Okay, so on to the next variable type, integer. This can store integers between negative 32,000 and positive 32,000, and it takes up 2 bytes of memory. And then if you want bigger integers, you declare a variable as long. That the type long can store, 2 trillion, negative 2 trillion to positive 2 trillion integers, and it takes up 4 bytes of memory. And notice that as you're storing bigger numbers, your memory is increasing that you're using. And then we have, if you want to use real numbers with decimal places. So you could declare a variable as a single type, and that'll declare real numbers with decimal places. And then a double type, this will declare even bigger real numbers with decimal places. And these take up, let's see, 4 bytes and 8 bytes of memory. For 4 bytes for singles, 8 bytes for doubles. And let's see, a date. So you can declare a variable as type date, and this could store dates. Notice that you have to put quotations around the date. You don't have to put quotations, notice, around the numbers. Then you could store strings. Oh wait, that date, it takes up 8 bytes of memory. Then you could store strings, and strings are text, so you could put like your name, like my name is Joe. This can store 2 billion characters. It takes up 10 bytes of memory. So notice that the memory gets bigger as you store dates and strings and singles and doubles. The memory, the space in your memory, it takes up more space in your memory. So it's critical that you use the smallest memories possible so your program's real fast. Okay, so those are the main variable types. I mean, that wasn't a lot, but you covered everything. We covered everything. So you have bytes that hold small numbers. Boolean holds just true or false. Integer stores integers. Long stores bigger integers. Single and double store real numbers. Single stores. They can store smaller real numbers. So just to clarify, these ranges here, a single can store, let's say, I don't know what this e to the 308, I mean, that's a huge real number. But a double can store even bigger real numbers. So the range is just bigger on these. Okay, so talking about storing, making your program as fast as possible. So these, when you declare a variable, you always want to have a type to it. If you don't, Excel is going to declare your variables as this type, variant. So I didn't mention this, but this type of variable, variant, it can store anything. It can store numbers, or it can store letters or strings, up to 2 billion characters. And notice that it takes up a lot of memory, 22 bytes plus the length of any string. So this variant is the biggest, it takes up the most space in memory. And this could be numbers without quotations, and then if you want to put a string in there, put the quotations on it. But variants can store anything. So if you have a program where you don't know if you're going to be working with numbers or letters or text or dates, then just declare a variable variant. But there's a drawback to that, is that it takes up a lot of space in your memory. So you always want to be cognizant of that, and you always want to declare your variables. And what I mean by that is, here's a variable declaration. I declared a variable, and if I assign it something, my variable equals 100, this is the way you want to do it. Okay, and just to show you again, you want to do it like this: dim, the name of the variable, and then the type, and then you assign it something. If you don't do it like that, if you don't do dim and you don't do as a certain type, it'll still work. So if I step through this, actually, let's see. If I step through this, I'm getting this error here, subrow function not defined, and that is because I had option explicit up here just a second ago. I removed it, and it's still in memory. So this might be a little confusing, but if you don't do this, it would have still worked. I just had a little bug there, but I don't want to redo the video. So what I want to say is this option explicit. What this means is that you have to declare your variables. So if I step into this now, let's see. Sorry. This is giving me an error because I'm using it twice. So, okay, let me just do this real quick. This will work here. If I don't declare it and I step into it, this will work. I didn't declare the variable. I just, had a name here and I assigned it 100. Well, notice that in memory here, in the locals window, it says this my variable has the value 100, but it's of type variant. That's very bad because it's storing a number and it's taking up 22 bytes. Remember, variant variables, they take up 22 bytes. That's a lot of memory, and you don't want to have that. So you always want to declare your variables like this with dim and then the type. So the correct way to do this is dim my variable as integer, because if you don't do that, then you're gonna declare all your variables are going to be stored as 22 bytes of memory. Your program's going to be very slow. And one thing to make sure that you do that is if you put option explicit here. This will ensure that all your variables need to be declared. So if I take this off and then I try to run it, let's see. If I try to run this, I should get an error. And that's correct. So this is because of option explicit. I get this error. So this makes you declare all your variables. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Bye.